Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mike's, proudly sponsored by our Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com, where you can find cool stuff in stock every day, and our co-sponsor CardHoarder.com, offering the best inventory prices and delivery of cards for Magic Online, and introducing our newest co-sponsor Cardamajigs.com, presenting Cubamajigs, durable, scratch-resistant plastic cases that are perfect for cubes, sideboards, and more, with new designs every single Monday. I'm Evan Irwin. I'm going to get started each week by saying hello to my two co-hosts, Aaron Campbell.
Hello.
Ruben Bressler.
It's going to take a couple weeks to get used to the new layout of the new intro, but sounds good to me. I'm very pleased to have it's amazing. We've been doing this for almost 4 years. We've got 3 sponsors in addition to viewers like you, and it's been it's spectacular.
It's been
Good
great.
problem to have. Like, oh man, how are we going to fit all these sponsors into one show? Like most shows don't have that problem.
Yeah, I use Cardamajigs products all the time. Primarily their deck of many monsters that I can be like, oh, my players went in a random direction. Well, here's a random troll for them to fight against, or here's the fire giant card, and yeah, they're an excellent company.
I need parental controls or a 12-step program because when I go to Cardamajigs, nothing, I mean, good things happen, but it always starts out innocent enough. I'm like, oh, I have a little sale. I'm just going to look around, just going to poke around, nothing serious. And before you know it, I'm like Saprolings and Elementals and Cats, and I have no decks to put them in, but I need.
Yeah.
Well, look, we also begin with our choice from the top comment from last week in a segment we call Honorable Mention, where Ruben will tell us who was the most luxuriant and letting us know what card we did not choose as one of our top 10 creature removal spells. Ruben?
People were passionate in the comment sections this week about spells that they thought were missed or that were perhaps entries. I had made mention that I wanted there to be a green removal spell, and there were lots of good entries for that. But I thought that the most eloquent and fullest comment deserving of the honorable mention came from Connor Bynum on YouTube, who writes, "Diabolic Edict. That is a card that deserves to be on anyone's list. Erin could put it on her list for the utility of sacrificing her own creatures. Evan could put it on his list for the history and how iconic the card is. Lastly, Ruben could put it on his list for being in a World Championship deck as a 4-of, piloted by Jakob Slemmer in 1999. This card gets around hexproof, indestructible, and even protection on creatures. If you value unconditionally, this card is one of the best. It even creates entertaining play environments of deciding which card is best to sacrifice. For example, is my flipped Delver more important than my Stoneforge Mystic? It can cheat in a Batterskull when I untap. This card defines what black does as a color and belongs among Dark Confidant for being defining card in that color. This removal spell is unique in the fact that I believe it is one of the few removal spells that is fun when cast against me, and I believe it warrants being on a top 10 list."
Very nice. Well, I wouldn't necessarily disagree. I think Diabolic Edict is amazing. Showed up in Tempest.
Absolutely.
And for those who don't know, it's a black and a generic mana for an instant that says target player sacrifices a creature, and has been a card that has seen play, been in cubes. Ever since I had a cube, it was always in there. There was never a question to take it out. It's instant speed. It's about as lowly cost as it's going to get. And yeah, I can't really argue much with that pick right there.
Absolutely.
It also increases the value of certain cards in order to provide insurance. Like you have cards like Colony Garden, cards like Grave Titan, cards that you may rate a certain way, but if you know that you're in a format where edict effects and edict is a verb, edict effects, that's a thing that you say. If you know that you're if you know that you're in a format with edict effects, certain cards increase in value as opposed to just running out your one fatty. Something that comes with sort of a package means that you have a great deal of resistance against those type of spells.
Well, we've talked about the world of Modern before Vizirasir existed a couple times. The world of Modern before Devour Flesh existed, which was a common in Gatecrash, was at a time where the Bogles deck was at an all-time high, and people just didn't have access to a 2-mana make an opponent sacrifice a creature. And then Devour Flesh came out, and the whole metagame shifted. Bogles went from a tier 1, like top 3 most played deck strategy to a tier 1.5, maybe 2, middle of the road strategy because Grixis John got access to an edict, and it was the first time they had anything that was 2 mana to be able to do that.
And that standard needed it too, because we still had Geist of Saint Trapped, we still had Invisible Stalker, Rancor was in the format. I remember playing standard at the time and being just so grateful for that particular type of spell. Like when you can get that off on turn 2, it was like,
Well, I mean, Devour Flesh is also, for those who don't know, it's a diabolical edict, but it also says you gain life. That target player sacrifices a creature, then gains life equal to that creature's toughness. So
Right.
it's, they got some value out of it. Yeah. So,
right.
But it was still an edict in a world that really needed them.
Yeah, it was swords to edict shares.
Nice. Well, Connor, congratulations on your win. Please contact us via moderators on moderators on Reddit. Is that still the best
been
way?
Working quite a bit lately. You can find me on Twitter if I don't have you blocked. Otherwise, if you come to the live show, hit me up.
There you go. We will make sure you get your stuff. Thanks, CoolStuffInc.com, for supporting this and this giveaway. But that means we're going to get started on our top 10 soldiers. And soldiers are pretty sweet. We didn't run into each other a lot, which I thought was kind of cool.
Over 600.
Yep. There's a whole bunch of them.
A lot of soldiers. A lot of historically relevant soldiers. There was recently a 9-0 Boros soldiers list at a GP, which I thought was great. And a modern. I am representing nothing but respect for my Master Chief from the Spartan program, bringing it back high school style for Halo.
Well,
I've done my part for the war effort. Okay.
Well, we've talked about when you.
Thank you for your service.
Nice. We've talked about when you need effects in certain environments, but my number 10 was really interesting because this card completely changed because Wizards changed how the rules worked. And as a result, the card literally did like one thing before and then more or less something totally different afterwards, which was really interesting. And it was one of my favorite soldiers to play. It was one of the decks that I built it and I was playing it actively in tournaments at the time. Because back in the day, and to those who don't know, you could put damage on the stack. Damage would be, it's going to be assigned, okay? I'm going to assign this damage. And if the creature goes away after you've said that, that damage still happens. Well, little card called Dauntless Escort showed up in Alara Reborn at first. And this is a green, white, and a generic mana for a 3/3 rare Rhino Soldier. And you sacrifice it, creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. Now, literally, in the middle of this being in Standard, they changed the M10 rules, which got rid of damage on the stack, and said, hey, that's really stupid and embarrassing to explain. Maybe we shouldn't have embarrassing rules in our game. So it's not. So Dauntless Escort could no longer put damage on the stack and then sacrifice to give all your stuff indestructible. You had to choose whether the 3-mana 3/3 was worth it, or if you wanted to give that 3/3 up in order to protect the rest of your team. So it just kind of just really changed everything about how powerful this card was and how, sort of opportunistic you could be with Dauntless Escort, because now you don't have that damage option any longer.
Yeah. Really important part of the conscription decks during Standard in particular, to be able to protect your Sovereigns of Lost Alara or whatever pieces you needed to protect. Has quite a good resume, some good bona fides with tournament success. I mean, it's got all the stats you want. I remember when this card was previewed and people were like, wow, from as soon as it was previewed, people were like, that's a card. That's a card that's going to see play. It's got all of the numbers that you need and an effect that's probably relevant, and they were right.
God, and the artwork is so good. The Vulcan Baga is like hunched down, like in there, ready to go. Like, it's so nice. That was fantastic. But Ruben, what is your number 10?
Well, I only have 2 hires, and one of them is my number 10. It's higher on somebody else's list.
Fair enough. Aaron, what is your number 10?
I love to tell the story about my number 10. It created one of my favorite EDH games. My friend Peter in my local commander pod wanted to test out the Scarab God before the set came out. And so he asked us if it was okay if he had like a proxy version of the Scarab God. And so he pulled up a picture of it on his phone and he just laid the phone there and that was his commander. And the deck felt fine. It didn't feel too busted. And he had a field of zombies at one point. I was playing Hapatra. I had a field of snakes. I was feeling pretty good about my board state. And so Peter takes a look at my board and he's like, you've got a lot of 1/1 death touch snakes. Like, that's going to be really hard to attack into. I'm sorry, do they have horsemanship? And I was like, no, I don't even know what that is. I don't know. And he goes, okay, cool. My number 10 is Sun Quan, Lord of Wu. So Sun Quan, Lord of Wu is 4 colorless and 2 blue from Portal 3 Kingdoms. It's a creature type legend, 4/4. All your creatures gain horsemanship as long as Sun Quan is in play. So he slams Sun Quan. All of his zombies now have horsemanship, and I die. which is pretty cool. Losing to
Your snakes don't ride horses, do they?
Pretty much. And so losing to a bunch of zombies on horses is pretty sweet, but I'd never heard of this card. And so horsemanship is another kind of evasion of ability. Kind of reminds me of Shadow a little bit, and that only creatures with horsemanship can block creatures with horsemanship. And so it's a really neat, obscure form of evasion that can really punch through games and in a commander game. And I'll just never forget that game of feeling so cocky, so sure of myself, and then whoops.
And then your snakes can't do anything because Suncron showed up. Now this was printed both
right over them.
It was printed both in Portal 3 Kingdoms and From the Vault Legends, which is interesting. Appreciate it.
$10 card ish.
Yeah. It's nice that it's not on the reserve list. Like they can pull this one back out if they want to.
The Portal 3 Kingdoms cards are, if you look at the prices of the most expensive soldiers, it's all Portal 3 Kingdoms cards. I think one of the most expensive, if not the most expensive creature in Magic right now is Zhang Dong, who's like a 3/3 for 5 that I think threatens a creature and is a soldier just out of nowhere. It's the weird list of cards that are in Portal 3 Kingdoms. Horsemanship is it's something. It is it is exactly the same wording as flying.
It's just flying part 2. It's flying.
But creatures with flying can't block people on horses and vice versa. I mean, and also you can give a creature both flying and horsemanship, which is delightful, I think is the word I would use there.
The ultimate evasion. Super evasion. Riding the Delu horse, I think, is currently the most expensive card in the set.
Sure.
That's a 3 mana, 1 creature gets +2/+2 in horsemanship. That's a $85 card right now.
Sure. And forever. It does not lose it at end of turn. That's essentially an enchantment you can't get rid of.
This effect lasts and definitely has been the official Oracle update for it. And yeah, that's just one of those cards that like I didn't want to buy it when I had my cube because I felt like an idiot for buying like a $50 at the time +2/+2 spell. But I mean, +2/+2 and unblockable for the rest of the game is pretty powerful. And that's one of those they can pull out as like a masterpiece, whatever, and people would lose their minds, which is awesome.
Right.
All right, so let's move on here to number 9. And number 9 is where we run into my first hire. So, Ruben, what is your number 9?
My number 9 is certainly a weirdo, and I'm not expecting anyone else to have it on their list, so not terribly surprising. But you know how much I like it when cards win Pro Tours, when they reach the top of the mountain, especially when they reach Pro Tours in decks that are so iconic. And there was a top 8 at Pro Tour Chicago in 2000 that featured Kai Bude, Brian Kibler, John Finkel, Zvi Mauschwitz, Camille Cornelson, Robert Doherty, among others.
Wow.
And this was the Rebels Pro Tour. And the finals was a Rebels mirror. And amongst the 2 decks in the finals, there was one creature that was not a Rebel. And that card, ladies and gentlemen, was Longbow Archer in Kai Bude's Rebels deck. Longbow Archer is a 2/2 for white. It is a human soldier archer. It has first strike and reach. To be in that deck, to be a piece of that strategy without being the titular creature type is pretty spectacular. To be such a staple piece, to be the go-to 2-drop for a white mid-range-ish aggressive strategy is something, and something notable that I thought was worth calling out, and at least deserves a little bit of recognition.
I mean, this card, well, first of all, it showed up in Visions, so this is sort of, the old man era of Magic cards, and which means I actually opened this up in a pack from time to time. I got to play with this card, because back in the day, this is above rate. This was really strong back in the day to have a 2-mana 2/2 first strike with reach. Like, that's like, what? You're not supposed to have all those abilities. It's supposed to be a 2/1, or it's supposed to be 3 mana, or whatever. Right. So Longbow Archer was really sweet in and of itself, and was also just an archer back in the day, and was later errata to a human soldier archer, which is nice. Was reprinted all the way up through 7th edition, and I think was removed, and I kid you not, I think it was removed because I thought it was too much above rate. Like, back then, they still hated on creatures, and they're like, wait a minute, you're getting X for Y mana, that's not okay. And drag the seller, Like, so off they went, taking the good cards away, which was fine. But Longbow Archer still has plenty of memories for me as well. Actually playing with that sucker in limited, and a little bit in constructed. My white weenie decks, they're always terrible.
Yeah, it was. It's it was the first in a long line of white tutus that had first strike and something. Things like Knight of Meadowbrain typically see standard play. Elite Inquisitor being another notable example. Most of those type of cards see play in standard, and Longbow Archer is the progenitor of all of that.
There you go. All right. So, Aaron, what's your number 9?
My number 9 is the only higher on my list.
Wow.
There you go. We got a lot of them out of the way early.
There we go. All right, let's move on here to number 8. Aaron, what's your number 8?
So right after Shadows over Innistrad block rotated, the mono black zombies deck, the zombies decks that had been in the format had been gutted. No pun intended. Particularly the mono black zombies list that Jerry T won the Pro Tour with. We lost a lot of really good cards like Restless Dead. We lost Crypt Breaker. We lost Diregraph Colossus. And so people were desperately trying to find a way to keep zombies alive. Again, no pun intended, I promise. And then my number 8 came along and people were like, maybe this is something we can use to kind of plug in the gaps and we can kind of keep this thing going. And this was even a card that I had tried out a little bit and it was fun. It was cute. But then the death blow, damn it, I'm doing it again, came when the rest of the sets rotated, when Kaladesh, Either Revolt, Nam, and Ket, Hour of Devastation rotated in October of 2018, and then zombies were finally put to rest.
Wow.
Can we get a counter here?
Wow.
Yeah, but this card really helped try to keep
making me feel dead inside. Making me feel.
But anyways, I did try this card and it did bring me a little bit of joy. My number 8 is Graveyard Marshal. So Graveyard Marshal is from Core Set 2019. It costs 2 black, 2 pips. It's a zombie soldier, 3/2, which alone is fine. Like you'll take that. You can pay 2 and a black to exile a creature card from your graveyard to create a tapped 2/2 black zombie creature token. So not only is it a serviceable body, but it also creates an army in a can, where if you play it on turn 2, that's fine. If you play it on turn 4 or 5, when you have some things in the graveyard, which you should if you're doing it right, this is fine too, being able to play it at instant speed. This is a really, really sweet card. And even though zombies, did, not come back after that last rotation, for a while there, this really helped.
I've been playing against a couple of, it's not common, but I've been playing against a couple of the mono black aggro decks online. There are pieces there. It is the least popular of the 5 monocolor decks available in Standard. Standard is in an insane place right now where there are 5 monocolor decks, 10 2-color decks, and 10 3-color decks, in addition to the 4-color Gates decks. It is a wild world of Standard out there that are all playable. But Graveyard Marshal does see play in those sort of black aggressive strategies. It is a scary card. Having impact on 2 different turns of the game, something like what Crypt Breaker had back in the day with zombies being a 1-drop and a 2-drop. This is a 2-drop and a 5-drop. Much like Pack Rat was a 2-drop and a 5-drop. So this, not as backbreaking as Pack Rat, but certainly a great entry.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those where, Wizards doesn't like, one tribe or one color or one strategy to be the best thing all the time. They essentially sort of talk about it as sort of like a pendulum that kind of walls around. Every once in a while, White Weenie is amazing. Every once in a while, zombies were the best deck, which they were there for a while in Shadows, which you could imagine why. But, when that stuff kind of works, it's really awesome to see them like going, okay, white-blue control is going to be good, and they make kind of red really good for a while, and they go back to black over here, and then green has some overpowered whatever. Like, the ability to kind of keep sort of people moving that way, and people not even really noticing it, which, I never really noticed like the sort of the super high level changes that they do to try to move the power level around, and that's something they care about. But as a player, I don't notice unless someone literally is like, check out what happened between this sequence of cards and how these rares left and these rares came in and all that stuff.
Well, I think we tend to notice it more when decks take off. Like I knew when we heard we were going back to Innistrad, people assumed there would be a zombies deck. You can't not have a zombies deck when Innistrad is in Standard, and we were waiting and we were waiting and we were waiting. But all it takes is that one card. All it takes is those 1 or 2 cards, and all we needed, ironically enough, was Amonkhet. Getting Liliana's Mastery, getting the Dread Wanderer. All of these little things that we thought we had everything, and then that one new set comes out and just adds 1 or 2 cards to the mix, and it changes everything. So I think we notice it more when cards are coming, not necessarily when they're leaving, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. That said, Ruben, what's your number 8?
My number 8 is the first entry of, wait a second, that's a soldier? You look at the art and it does not look particularly soldier-like. I'm not saying anything about, the body type or anything. I'm not making any social commentary here. It's just, it's also listed as like the card name doesn't seem to me to be a soldier. When I think soldier, I don't necessarily think of people who are prison workers, people who work at a jail. But Palace Jailer is a soldier, turns out, and is my number 8. So Palace Jailer is 2 colorless white for a 2/2 human soldier. And it's uncommon from Conspiracy Take the Crown. When Palace Jailer enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. When Palace Jailer enters the battlefield, exile target creature an opponent controls until an opponent becomes the monarch. That creature returns under its owner's control. This card, of course, won Pro Tour 25th anniversary, as 1/3 of the team was Death and Taxes. This is a huge staple piece of that deck at this point. At least one Palace Jailer in the main deck and another one in the sideboard of most every Death and Taxes deck that you can find in Legacy these days. Having that Oblivion Ring effect on a body that you can vial in a format where Lightning Bolt is typically at a low compared to the other formats, and removal spells are lessened based on the necessities of the format. And combat damage is lessened because Death and Taxes, of course, is a great board control kind of strategy. So being able to get through and take out a Palace Jailer, not necessarily going to be easy. I've played so many games where I played a Palace Jailer, became the Monarch, and then my opponent killed my Palace Jailer and was like, oh, do I get my creature back? And I was like, no. Nope, sure don't.
That's not how that works. The Monarch, for those who don't know, showed up in Conspiracy Take the Crown, and they made a token for it. And
yes, they did.
Of us.
Well, we made a token of us for it, but the original that came in the packs happened to accidentally a whole word. At the beginning, your end step, draw a card, and whenever a creature deals combat damage to you, its controller becomes the Monarch. Therefore, you have the Monarch mechanic, so you have to deal combat damage via a creature in order to lose being the Monarch status.
Yeah, I have this in my Marchesa EDH deck. You mentioned, how unique it is that getting rid of the body doesn't mean anything. And if you're playing a sort of Mardu control deck where you can build a pillow for it, you're using Ghostly Prison, you're using, whatever, just any of those sort of Windborne Muse, any of those sort of taxing effects that, they can get rid of the creature, but they're not going to be able to damage you. And so it's surprising to remain the Monarch in EDH. Like, people just don't prioritize it like you think they would. And so as long as you can find a way to prevent damage, Island Sanctuary is a really great little thing I love to use when I'm doing any sort of Monarch shenanigans. It's surprisingly easy to keep the Monarch, and if you can, that thing is going to stay exiled.
Yeah, I think the idea that you get back what you're exiling is just kind of this sort of expectation, right? It's sort of like this play pattern that we're very used to, which is Oblivion Ring, whatever, and then when you kill the Oblivion Ring thing, it comes back. You're like, no, not this one. It's good and clean.
It's one of those reading the card explains the cards, because I have this problem with a lot of cards like that, where you just expect the card to do something.
I was playing Commander last night with the folks on our Patreon stream, and there's a Sphinx that reduces a life total to 10.
Yeah.
Or makes your life total 10. Mm-hmm. Someone reanimated that and targeted me, and I was like, if I just kill that, am I back to normal? And they were like, no.
That trigger's going to resolve. So look, if anything, Ruben and I are always on very somewhat similar wavelengths. Very similar. In many ways. Well, look, if you're looking at the world of Legacy or the world of Commander, you guys obviously know where the Palace Jailer comes in. But look, I like to play Pauper. I enjoy Pauper. I like seeing what Pauper's been doing. I'll be honest, Pauper lately has not been in the greatest area, but it's fine.
Okay.
It's fine. It's not great. They should have banned stuff, but they didn't. Whatever. And it's still not a format because Wizards is, I don't know, lost their mind. It's weird. But
I'm playing Pauper at GPLA, though. I'm not entering the main event. I'm probably playing in the Pauper event in LA.
All right.
Well, one card you must be aware of, and one card that even shares the first name as your 8th pick, Ruben, is not just the Palace the Jailer. You got to look out for the Palace Sentinels.
Sure.
The Palace Sentinels are definitely a force to be reckoned with, and Pauper, they are a white and 3 generic mana for a 2/4 common human soldier, and when it enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch. don't always necessarily need to get the sweet, Oblivion Ring type effect in order to be awesome. Sometimes you can have 4 toughness, which is very important when you're trying to block and make sure that they don't get that Monarch from you. So this card has those advantages. Wizards did put these things into treasure chests, and they got very expensive pretty quickly because everyone wanted to play them in Pauper, and then they kept up the frequency, and eventually we got to, a good spot at this point where you can get them for, I don't know, like $1 or something.
Great entry.
Oh, I'm sorry, $5.
No,
Wow.
if you get paper, you can get them for as low as 80 cents in paper. If you look at our lovely sponsor Card Hoarder, at least 5 tickets.
Okay, well, yeah, 5.14 tickets right there in front of me.
There you go.
And that's as of this recording, so.
The Monarch, and of course the deck Boros Monarch is the most popular version of the deck that uses Palace Sentinels, which is sort of essentially a board control deck that uses a lot of tokens and a lot of artifact strategies kind of stuff. And then Palace Sentinels is its card advantage engine. This and Thorn of the Black Rose in particular have really shifted how some of the decks in Pauper utilize card advantage, because the Monarch is an easy way for colors that don't typically get card advantage, namely the non-blue strategies, to be able to draw extra cards and get raw cards. Yeah. And so having that access in a red-white deck in Pauper is huge, and why it's become so popular.
Absolutely. Yeah, the reason why the Boros Monarch deck gets so much more mileage out of Monarch because it has a lot of bounce abilities and a lot of bounce spells. The one downside to cards like Palace Jailer is that a lot of times you get that ETB, and then if you happen to lose the Monarch, you've lost it. But when you're running things like the Sky Fisher, there's like a thing that's like a flyer,
Sky Fisher.
Yeah, there's all sorts of bounce effects to where if you lose the Monarch, that's fine. You're perfectly happy to bounce this thing, and then you're able to get it and recur it over and over again, which makes that deck in particular so good with the Monarch.
Yep.
Same thing with Tortured Existence, the black version. If your Thorn happens to die, you loop it back and get it over again.
There you go. All right, so let's move on here to number 7. Ruben, what's your number 7?
My number 7 is the only entry on my top 10 that did not win a Pro Tour. It's never come even close. It's never going to top 8 a Pro Tour. It's also not in the Cube. I don't think it'll ever top deck or ever top 8 a Grand Prix. It's never going to do any of that. However, it is one of the 5 most popular commanders of all time. Up there with Atraxa and Breya and Nekusar and Marin of Clan Telnoth sits the second entry on my, wait a second, that's a soldier list. Oloro, Ageless Ascetic, is a soldier, kind of. It's also a giant.
He's literally sitting.
That's true, yeah. It's a giant soldier, originally from Commander 2013. Legendary creature, giant soldier. It's a 4/5. At the beginning of your upkeep, you gain 2 life. And when you gain life, you may pay a colorless. If you do, draw a card and each opponent loses 1 life. And here's the kicker. Here's the big one. At the beginning of your upkeep, if Oloro, Ageless Ascetic is in the command zone, you gain 2 life. So being a 6-mana 4/5 with those 2 other abilities, that's cute and all, but every turn of the game, you're gaining 2 life, regardless of where Oloro, Ageless Ascetic is.
Yeah.
That's why it's so popular. Oloro Prison is the most notable version of Oloro that I've seen. Lots of those kind of sphere effects. It's also lots of, when you gain life, do stuff kind of decks. Really popular with the political strategies that are available to you in the Esper combos. I've seen all kinds of Oloro decks, and really popular commander.
This was my number 9. This was Eminence before Eminence became a thing. They actually gave this thing, and they actually gave that ability a name. You have cards like Edgar Markov that was an entire line of planeswalkers that didn't have to be out to actually do anything. And Oloro was one of the really first to capitalize that. You see this card often played with things like Sanguine Bond. Mm-hmm. I lost to a young man who was playing Ivra, Halcyon Witness, and Sanguine Bond.
Wow.
Really brutal combos. The Vizkopa Guildmage, Sanguine Bond, Exquisite, Exquisite Blood. Those types of combos really flourish in a deck with Oloro. And Just a very powerful commander. And also too, I was very surprised to see it in the soldier list.
Right, because back, remember, this was Commander 2013, 6 years ago. Oh my God, you're talking about the command zone? That's crazy. So that was new hot fire stuff, and was later a Judge foil in 2014.
Yep.
Which was pretty cool.
Got very popular very fast. And there are lots of great cards in those Allura decks that combo with whenever you gain life, do something else. And so just having this card in the command zone turns all of those cards on. Just a extremely, extremely powerful engine piece.
Very nice. Aaron, what is your number 7?
My number 7 is a standard all-star, and when you look at it, it's kind of innocuous. Like, you're like, oh, it's cute, it's fine. And then when you see what it can do, and you see all the ways that it survives and the flavor of it all, it starts to make a lot more sense. My number 7 is Adanto Vanguard. So Adanto Vanguard is from Ixalan. It's 1 colorless and a white. It's a vampire soldier. It's just a 1/1. Fine, nothing to see here. As long as it's attacking, it gets +2/+0. 3/1, still nothing to worry about. Easy peasy to deal with. But you can pay 4 life, and Adanto Vanguard gains indestructible until end of turn. Wow. So you have the vampire flavor of leeching life from you. You have something that can kind of play with its power. There are removal spells that look at power and things of that nature. It looks the ability to survive board wipes and removal spells makes it really, really pesky. This is big in the mono white list, the Azorius aggro decks that are seeing play right now. And just who'da thunk? I wouldn't look at this and think standard all-star, but here we are.
Yeah, this thing was just nonstop, and I've been beaten to death by this card before, where you're just like, I can't, like, they have a healthy life total, and you're sort of on the back foot, and like, nothing can stop this stupid 3/1. Everything you play has 3 toughness, nothing that can stop it at the moment, and or you play something and they'll like bolt it as well as paying 4 life, and then you're back to the same position again, and I could just get killed with the thing, and it's happened. It's weirdly just sets a crazy clock on you, and you can just lose to this guy.
Yeah, it's a heck of a card in the mono white strategies. Not every mono white deck wants this as their 2-drop. The 2-drop slot in standard right now shifts between Tithe Taker, a Johnny's Pride Mate, and this, depending on what your build is. But certainly it is the death knell of, if you're a control deck, you do not want to see this card. None of your wrath effects work, none of your removal spells work, and you're not pressuring the life total enough to make it a drawback. So having access to this card, if all you're doing is being able to play against those 3-color control decks, man, this card is so good.
Yeah, Wizards has built in a lot of answers in terms of Brask's Contempt, and you got Seal Away and stuff, and there's ways to stop the card, but it's fewer and far between when you're trying to deal with everything else, essentially.
If your Vraska's contempting my Adanto Vanguard, I count that as a win.
Yeah, you're probably losing, essentially, that one. But moving back here to Magic 2010. Now, when they made Magic 2010, this was like the reboot. This was the big, we're doing rules changes, mana burn's getting out of here, damage on the stack is stupid. Like, we're going to have some serious, awesome creatures. Creatures were going to be great. And they were going to make creatures super BA. We had Baneslayer Angel just blowing everybody's mind or whatever, but this one was the one, at least at the time, like, obviously I knew Baneslayer Angel was great, but this one we're almost like, oh my God, we are in a new world now. And I was just blown away by Captain of the Watch. Captain of the Watch is just a monstrous magic card. It is 2 white, 4 generic mana, so 6 mana for a 3/3 rare human soldier. But hold on, it's got vigilance. Other soldier creatures you control get +1/+1 and have vigilance, so she's a lord in and of herself. When Captain of the Watch enters the battlefield, put 3 1/1 white soldier creature tokens onto the battlefield. So it was an army of 4 creatures across 11 power and toughness in 6 mana. We've never 9 power and toughness. We've never seen anything anywhere close to those numbers.
Oh yeah.
Like, not even like a little bit close to those numbers. And yeah, I was just like, oh, you mean I gotta top deck this? And I got like a whole freaking army that's punting everybody, and it's a soldier lord and M10, y'all, it's happening, and that was great. And that was part of why I was excited about Magic 2010.
White's honest to goodness Siege Gang commander. The only thing that comes close in terms of power is another core set card, Grave Titan, but does not have as many bodies, does not pump other stuff on the board. So it doesn't have an immediate, impact on the red zone that Captain of the Watch does. Had a little bit of a flash in the pan where you might not expect it in Legacy, where Preeminent Captain was sneaking it into play, doing its best Goblin Lackey Siege Gang Commander impression.
Wow.
In Soldier Stompy, I don't think has any top finishes in that deck, but yeah, Captain of the Watch, an absolute bomb and limited, really iconic soldier, being a soldier lord, being an army in the can, absolutely great.
Yeah, I'm curious if any of you guys actually choose Preeminent Captain, because now that I'm looking at Preeminent Captain, I'm like, holy cow, that was a really cool, flavorful soldier.
It was a cool card.
Maybe we'll get there. All right, so let's move on here to number 6. My number 6 is my final hire, so can't choose number 6. But Ruben, do you have a number 6?
I do have a number 6. My number 6 is near and dear to my heart. The first Pro Tour, or actually, yeah, the first Pro Tour that I attended as a staff or as a news person. What am I thinking of? A press person.
Reporter, yeah.
Yeah, as a reporter.
Coverage.
Was Pro Tour Montreal, which of course was won by Tom Martell as a member of Team Star City Games while I was working at Star City Games, and I was up there in freezing cold Montreal in February, which is not great. But I had a lovely time, and that tournament was a ton of fun, and had another just amazing top 8. This, of course, was the top 8. Melissa DeTora made top 8 as the first woman to ever make a Magic the Gathering top 8, but also included Jerry Thompson, Owen Turtenwald, S-Man, Stephen Mann, Eric Froelich, Ben Stark, Yoel Larson, and then was taken down by Tom Martell. Taken down by the Aristocrats, which was designed by Sam Black, notable fan of Sacrifice a Creature, Do Anything. And one of the big pieces of that deck was the 1-drop Doomed Traveler. Doomed Traveler is a 1-mana, 1/1, originally from Innistrad, just a common. And when Doomed Traveler dies, create a 1/1 spirit creature token with flying. With so many sacrifice effects in the deck, primarily Falkenrath Aristocrat and Cartel Aristocrat, hence the name, but also you had Skurzdag High Priest to take advantage of the Morbid trigger, lots of other stuff like that, lots of really interesting, cool things that you could do. Doom Traveler was a staple piece of many decks throughout its lifespan, including human-centric decks, White Weenie, even the Delver decks. There was like a blue-white aggro Delver deck that was popular at the time. And then later, Aristocrats switched to a junk version, and Doom Traveler remained a part of that as well.
Yeah, and now it's become its own mechanic in a sense. You have Afterlife and Ravnica Allegiance where, multiple creatures can do this, and they can even make multiple spirits when they die. And so, it's a level of, you can tell that a card is iconic when it becomes a mechanic or when it becomes a verb, like Edict and Edict of Deck. This card was great. And even if you're not doing broken things, sometimes just having an extra blocker, sometimes getting a creature twice over is fine by itself.
We've seen that in Standard with Hunted Witness, which is the next in the line of when this dies, make a token. There's no sacrifice outlets in those mono white decks. It's just another body, and it's just good enough already.
It's just value. I think one of the other things that was so great about Doom Traveler is that it was very flavorful. Innistrad was the flavor set. It was supposed to really go top down, and you're like, wow, that guy dies and his spirit's like suddenly floating in the air, which you would expect it to. And that's, all that's very resonant. And that the fact that it became a mechanic is great. It just shows you how resonant and how good it is. But the idea of like, wow, this, the name into the mechanic into what it does, like that was so good in Innistrad, and just help that set be that much more impactful. All right, so Aaron, what is your number 6?
My number 6 is an important part of the Merfolk deck, specifically in Modern Merfolk, which prides itself on having a critical mass of lords, cards that give other Merfolk +1/+1. And that would be enough. Like, if that's all it did, like Lord of Atlantis, you get Island Walk with it, and that's fine. If you just gave it the +1/+1, you'd probably take that too. But my number 6 is probably one of the most versatile lords I've ever seen. You can use it just defensively, or if you want to tap or untap blockers or incoming creatures. You can clear the way for your own creatures. You can also tap or untap your own lands. If you decide that you've got a handful of gas and you want to make sure that you cast it all, you can even untap your own Ether Vial for more shenanigans. I just love all the possibilities with this card. My number 6 is Marrow Reejerey. So Marrow Reejerey is from Lorwyn. It is a creature type merfolk soldier. 2/2 other merfolk creatures get +1/+1. And whenever you play a merfolk spell, you may tap or untap target permanent. You know, there's so many things that you can do with this card, which really increases the value of it. Like I said, if you want to clear the way, you can cast a merfolk, tap a thing, do another thing. I mean, this is just really, really good. And I love seeing all the ways that people use it, and just the epitome of like what a good flavorful lord should be.
It's also the epitome of what Wizards doesn't do anymore. Wizards is not in the business of having triggers that are on creatures that have onboard things that go off all the time. When you cast a merfolk spell, X and Y, when a merfolk enters the battlefield, so and so. Like, Lorwyn was one of the most complicated limited sets of all time. And that's a reason, or there's a reason rather, why what you would consider Pro Tour Lorwyn, essentially the Pro Tour after Lorwyn and User Pro Tour Limited, was won by Johnny Magic himself, John Finkel, because it was, I loved it. For what it's worth, I totally loved it. But Lorwyn, if you go back and look at Lorwyn, go see how many crazy sort of, when you do this
crazy onboard ridiculousness,
infinite onboard tricks. And they said, look, this is too much. And they really pulled it back in what they call the New World Order. And nothing since, and they've been creeping towards it, I'll be honest, but nothing since I've seen is close to like Lorwyn's shenanigans. Not
to mention letting you tap any permanent. Like nowadays, everything is non-land permanent. They won't let you tap or untap lands, but this is any permanent. Creatures, lands, whatever you got, tap it. I don't care. Like, woof.
Yeah, it was crazy. You could chain together multiple merfolk spells. You're untapping your own lands. Like, that was a thing.
I played a very early version of the Legacy Merfolk deck at Worlds in 2008 in the Legacy like main event side event combo, where I took second place to one Mr. Cedric Phillips, and I was playing cards like Tidal Warrior. I had Stifle Knot in my sideboard. This was a very early version of that deck, and it featured Marrow Reejerey. And the number of cool things that you can do with Marrow Reejerey, of like Violet in, play 3 Curse Catchers until your hand is empty, 1 mana Silvergill Adepts, and then tap down whatever your opponent's blocker is, was a sight to behold.
All right, let's move on here to number 5, of which I have one. No more hires left. Earlier today, I have gone so meta, you guys. I have gone so meta.
I love this.
That sometimes I ask my own questions for myself years ahead of time that I also needed to know years ago. So on October 26, 2016, I asked, how do you pronounce something? And then this morning I said, how do you pronounce something? And the number one Google result was me asking, how do you pronounce this? Because I was like, I don't want to get it wrong. So I wanted to make sure, because it's spelled weird in and of itself. And also the card itself just means so much in a variety of ways.
And hashtag Southern.
And hashtag Southern, because y'all, for real, I'm reading this direct because I have to. It's Kynaios and Tiro.
Yes!
Kynaios and Tiro. Yay, we got there.
We did it.
Of Meletis is my number 5. And they are pictured together. It is a blue, white, green, and red commander from Commander 2016, a legendary creature, human soldier. And it is a 2/8. Got a big old booty. At the beginning of your end step, you draw a card. Each player, may put a land card from his or her hand onto the battlefield. Then each opponent who didn't draws a card. And it has the incredible flavor text of, look what we fought for, look what we built together.
Yeah, this was a game-breaking card, in that this was the first time we had ever seen a male couple prominently featured on a card, and there's no mistaking that they're a couple. You know, you have I assume Kynaios with his helmet off, you have Tyros touching the back of his head, you have them looking out at this world. In the background you have the Guardians of Meletis, which is the 2 statues that portray them and first alluded to this couple being in distance. And there were so many people that just lost their minds of like, holy crap, we are on a card. If you're playing this commander, you're most likely playing a group hug style of deck. That's typically what this card kind of embodies. And so this card just made a huge impact from the moment it came out, not just in a social capacity, but also in an EDH capacity as well.
Yeah, this card is really. And wait a minute, which one's which?
I took a guess there, but you regardless of who's who, you can't mistake that these two are together.
Oh, for sure. I was like, wait a minute, who's Tiro and who's
right?
Kaneos?
Yeah, this also
which one of
harkens
you's
back.
The Kaneos and which one of you's the Tyros?
Heyo.
That's amazing,
like that.
Is now a T-shirt. This card is also harkens back to the card Inax and Sinidi, which was also from Theros, and sort of has a reflection of the art style of what they built as the essentially like the Sparta equivalent, if you know any story about that. But this sort of reflects that art style while also harkening back to the Guardians of Meletis, which was a common from Theros originally, just an 06 wall for 3, but obviously became much more socially relevant. One of the top 15 or 20 most popular commanders. The 4-color commanders were really a game changer. It let people explore a lot more interesting options for commander. This card allowing the cards to flow in larger commander games really lent itself for that political group hug kind of strategy.
The for those who don't know, back in Theros, there was the common Guardians of Meletis, a 3 generic mana 06 defender, but the flavor text was the real get, but says the histories speak of 2 feuding rulers whose deaths were celebrated and whose monuments symbolize the end of their wars. In truth, they were peaceful lovers, their story lost to the ages, and it is no longer lost, and it is just our wholesome magic cards. Like, it's fantastic.
Could be gayer, but
it really could be. Like, but we'll take it. That's up to Nick Prince to fix.
Nick, you gotta tell us how it could be. We gotta up it here.
Which one of you is the Kianos? Which one is the Tiro?
MTG Pro Shop, you get on that. You're welcome. That one's free. Evan says that one's free.
Pretty good. Ruben, what's your number 5?
My number 5 has made a very recent appearance in our top 10s list, no less than 2 weeks ago. In our top 10 one-drops of all time, where we spouted quite a bit about the excellent qualities that Thraben Inspector doth possess. Thraben Inspector is a 1/2 human soldier, and when Thraben Inspector enters the battlefield, investigate. Create a colorless clue artifact token with pay 2 mana and sacrifice this artifact, draw a card. Again, a big part of those Boros Monarch decks won the Pro Tour in the hands of Steve Rubin, where the 4 mana creatures are a murderer's row, or the 4 of creatures are a murderer's row of just all-star standard standouts of Archangel Avacyn, Hanger Backwalker, Sylvan Advocate, and Thraben Inspector, and that was the creature suite. So when you're in that conversation, you are well deserving of a spot on the list.
This is just one of those cards that it's, for me, again, I didn't think that much of it when it first showed up, but like it literally took like a weekend to be like, oh my god, it's one of the best 1-white mana creatures ever made ever. It's just incredible. Creating artifacts matters sometimes. Adding permanents matters sometimes. Like there's so many different ways that this impacts the board, what you're doing, your strategies, other cards interacting with it. It's nothing but great stuff when it comes to Thraben Inspector.
Yeah.
Early in its life, it was part of those Celestia aggro decks and the Bant Humans decks and the White Weenie decks. As it grew and became an older part of the format, it started driving Smuggler's Copters around as part of the Mardu Vehicles decks, and has had an extended legacy in Pauper and even Modern, as just a way to get 2 permanents on the board, as a white creature that can replace itself in the late game. Just a spectacularly good card.
It's hard to say too many good things about it. Aaron, what is your number 5?
All right, so we're gonna make a stop to On Brand Town here. There's nothing better than killing your own creatures, especially when you're gonna get value out of them. And the only thing, and I love, this is a very important piece of the Nick Fit decks in Legacy, where you play a very harmless looking 1/1 and you keep running it into your opponents, and they'll take the 1, they don't care. But then you play something like Cabal Therapy, you play something like Phyrexian Tower, you find any number of ways to sacrifice it. And then you start ramping into this kind of toolbox style deck. And then you start having fun casting drag tusk and things of that nature. My number 5 is Veteran Explorer. So Veteran Explorer is 1 green. It is summon human soldier scout. So a whole bunch of creature types there. 1 power, 1 toughness. If Veteran Explorer is put into any graveyard from play, each player may search their library for up to 2 basic lands and put those lands into play. Each player shuffles their library afterwards. And Legacy people don't run very many basic lands, so and you happen to be running a lot of basic lands, so you're fine kind of dropping this on turn 1. You're fine running it into things. You're fine blocking with things. You have any number of ways to sacrifice this, and you do. And then before you know it, you are ramping into threats that most Legacy decks might scoff at, but still have no way to really deal with. And so this is a very, very important piece of that deck, and serving a very unconventional kind of soldier role. We talked about Doomed Traveler. When you think of soldiers, you don't think trying to sacrifice themselves. And in this particular sense, you want this thing to die. You are so okay with it dying.
Well, I think for me, the thing I like about it is that, if you go all the way back to Weatherlight, it was a soldier. The only type line name there was a soldier, which I think is cool. This card was very close to my top 10. It's really great that this is not on the reserve list, which was nice. They've printed it a couple times in Commander sets and recently in Battle Bond, which is neat. Let me tell you, back in the day, everyone hated this card. It was the stupidest, most garbage card you'd ever seen. Like, why in the world would you ever play this? It was bad. It was bad.
All you needed was to create a format where no one played any basic lands.
Yeah, and then it became amazing because back then we did, and it was like, what is this garbage card? I don't understand it. And but these days, it's sweet. All right.
Again, add that one to the list of what this thing's a soldier.
That thing's a what? Is a who?
What a weirdo.
We're over here to number 4. Ruben, what's your number 4?
My number 4 is a 4-drop. And it's the highest 4-drop on my list. And it is an invitational card. The Magic Invitational meant that we got to have cards like Sylvan Safekeeper and Avalanche Riders and Meddling Mage, Solemn Simulacrum, lots of those. The second to last of those is my number 4. It's Antoine Rouel's invitational card, originally from Shards of Alara. It then later won a Pro Tour in the hands of Paul Rietzel with White Weenie in an extended Pro Tour at Pro Tour Amsterdam in 2010. And it's Ranger of Eos. Ranger of Eos is 3 colorless and a white for a human soldier. It's a 3/2. And when a Ranger of Eos enters the battlefield, you may search your library for up to 2 creature cards with converted mana cost 1 or less, reveal them, and put them in your hand. If you do, shuffle your library. Just an extremely good card. Was reprinted in Modern Masters 2017. It's been off and on in the Vintage Cube, not so much anymore because the 1-drops aren't nearly as impactful in the Cube formats. But being able to search up Figure of Destiny or Step Links or Student of Warfare in Paul Rietzel's winning list was very relevant at the time. Just a really amazing card. It's card advantage in white once again. And just a fabulous card.
Very popular birthing pod target, very popular Court of Calling target. There are so many ways to just abuse this that it's just another one of those cards that as long as they keep printing creatures, as long as the creatures along that curve are good, the value of this card increases.
I mean, as 1-drops continue to get better, you basically have this. When it first showed up, it was a little bit of a question mark in terms of like, clearly it's awesome getting 2 cards. Are there enough good 1-drops that we care? And is a 4-mana 3/2 enough in terms of stats? And it clearly is. It's also one of those cards that, as the invitational cards get reprinted, they keep basically erasing the people who were in them. And I always felt that the whole reason, the Dark Confidant, Meddling Mage, and Ranger of Eos, the whole reason why these are important and interesting cards, particularly in the Magic history, is the players that caused them to exist, regardless if they were changed later. And Snapcaster Mage is one of the best Magic cards ever because they couldn't give him, land counterspell. But instead it just kind of erases them. And I've always really disliked that and felt like it's kind of, I don't know about disrespectful is the right word, but it takes away what I feel is one of the cool aspects of the card is the unique look of the player that brought it to you. So,
and of course, this was also a 4-of in the Naya Lightsaber deck that won Worlds in 2009,
yes.
Which is much different than the Naya deck at the time. The Naya deck at the time was a Goblin Guide deck, and Lightsaber was a Baneslayer Angel deck, and those were much, much different decks, but both ran Ranger of Eos.
Yeah, this was this the it ran 4 forests, 4 untapped green sources, I believe is the way they
Four
put it.
total untapped green sources with 4 noble hierarchs.
With
Yeah.
4 noble hierarchs. Yeah, that was that deck. That was the punchline you get to use whenever you talk about Nile Lightsaber.
Yeah.
Aaron, what's number 4 for you?
So now we're starting to get into the multi-format all-stars. You know, I look for cards that are so powerful that you can find them in Legacy and Vintage or even older formats. And so this is a card that came out very recently, and people predicted it was going to have an immediate impact on Vintage. There was no Vintage deck that was not going to be adversely affected by this card, and it remained to be seen whether or not that prediction was going to be true. Cut to the VSL, in which 3 decks the first week all featured this card. She has been an important piece of the metagame from the jump. Hasn't really made a splash in other formats. We really haven't seen her in Modern, Legacy, or even Standard, I believe. I could be wrong. But in Vintage, she's made a huge impact. There is a sniff test where if you cannot deal with this card, don't even bother coming. It's like everything everybody predicted. My number 4 is Lavinia Azorius Renegade. So Lavinia is a human soldier from Ravnica Allegiance. She costs a blue and a white. Legendary creature human soldier 2/2. Each opponent can't cast non-creature spells with converted mana cost greater than the number of lands that player controls. Who plays lands in Vintage? You're playing Moxen, you're playing Mana Crypt, you're playing Mana Vault. No one's paying for their spells with lands.
Yeah.
You slam this and it has an immediate effect on the board. Force of Will, Ravenous Trap, Paradoxical Outcome.
Dread Return.
Dread Return, no deck. Literally every single deck in Vintage is affected by this card. And that's just the first paragraph. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, if no mana was spent to cast it, counter that spell. Moxen gone, Lotus gone.
Yeah. Force of Will, Ravenous Trap again.
Right.
I remember my first week in the VSL, I'm very proud of myself. I had played a Trinisphere, and the only reason I was able to actually get my Moxen off is because I had to pay 3 each for those suckers just to throw out this card. The card has just made such an impact on the format. If you're playing Belcher or Storm, good luck. And you just really have to ask yourself, what am I going to do about Lavinia? And this card was predicted to be a big hit, and it has easily proven that point.
That's amazing, and I love that. I love when like it's a clear scalpel for a very clear purpose, and it just does exactly what they wanted it to do. It's not hitting anywhere else because it wasn't supposed to. It was like this solves problems that Vintage creates.
It solves problems that Vintage creates, and it also is not focused. Like, it doesn't scream, like, it doesn't seem aimed at one specific deck. You know, it'd be one thing if it seemed aimed at Shops or aimed at Outcome or aimed at Dredge, but it's just so vague. And then you're forced to kind of look at your own deck building, and you're like, I really don't have any lands, you know?
Right.
And I like that. I like the fact that it doesn't appear to be going after a specific deck. It really forces you to look at the format as a whole and say, how did we get here? Like, are we responsible for this? Like, should we have been building our decks a little better? Do we need to build our decks a little better? And I think that makes a great answer.
I love it when they print 2/2s for 2, better known as hate bears, that do stuff like this that make you question yourself. And you're like, wait, so Gadok Teague says I can't do this. Should I be doing this? Containment Priest says I can't do this. Should I be doing this? Lavinia says I can't do this. Should I be? Well, it says 2 things. And Lavinia is unique in a couple of ways in that it is blue, so you can run it alongside Force of Will if you really wanted to. And it has 2 different abilities, much like Gadok Teague. So it is a unique animal for sure.
Doubly hating. Well, my my number 4 here is interesting. It got picked as sort of one of its representatives for the set itself in Masters 25, which I thought was cool. This is a card that has been brought up a lot in terms of like, will shut down people's worlds the moment it hits play. This is a card that is very efficient, and at its time was very efficient. Got to see lots and lots of standard play. Also brought in against one of the most popular decks, is one of the best hoser cards ever made. Is a card that has never changed its image, because I think that the image itself is terrific, of the giant axe up on the back of the shoulders, of Core Firewalker. Core Firewalker originally showed up in Worldwake. It is an uncommon core soldier with protection from red. Whenever a player casts a red spell, you may gain 1 life. And they're not going to print this card much anymore, particularly in Standard, because they don't do protection anymore. But that's still going to show up in Modern, and it's still going to be in cubes. And when they're playing red spells, this is the number 1 card I think you go to say, like, well, do you just want to throw a Core Firewalker at it? Fine.
I love any card that hoses Burn. And I remember the one time I tried playing Burn, I did an April Fool's Day stream where I taped up the mountain, I covered up the swamp, I had a red tint on my camera, I wore red, and I was like, all right, if we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And I remember someone played it against me, and I looked at my chat and I was like, we've got answers, right? And someone looks at my deck list and they're like, you really don't? Back it up, girl. And I was just like, like the only thing I think that keeps this card from seeing more play is the mana cost is so restricted. You do need double white. And so you have to have a very favorable mana base to do that or be playing the right kind of deck. I think if it were like 1 and a white, we'd be seeing this everywhere. And so when it's good, it's very good. And when you are willing to make that payment, when you are willing to do that to get that card out, it's very worth it. But so good.
Yeah, this card's the nightmare. I've even played this in the sideboard of my burn decks.
Yep.
Because you have like 10 fetch lands and 4 sacred foundries, and so you're able to be
whenever you cast a spell, it doesn't say it has to be the opponent, it can be anybody.
That's right.
Yeah. One of, if not the best hate cards ever printed.
Yeah, I mean, with the ability to gain life, it's sort of like an Iron Star, but it's on legs, and that can just turn the tide in and of itself. Right. Look,
I mean, I'm not above playing a Dragon's Claw in my sideboards, so anytime that I can get that attached to a 2/2.
Yeah, it was Dragon's Claw I was thinking of. But look,
Iron Star is similar, but
a River of Lava is just another river to cross. Just so you guys know. There you go. Moving here to number 3, Ruben. What is your number 3?
My number 3 is a 3-drop. It is also the most expensive soldier, money-wise, that isn't from Portal 3 Kingdoms. It also won a Pro Tour, of course, in the Death and Taxes deck that Alan Wu played at the Minneapolis Pro Tour. And it's become a staple part of the Death and Taxes strategy as a way to seek out one-ofs to go get your Mirren Crusader or your Palace Jailer or your Sanctum Prelate if you want to. Anytime you put the word recruiter on a Magic card, it's dangerous, right? Goblin Recruiter is banned. Duskwatch Recruiter is a huge part of the Coco decks. Imperial Recruiter was a $200 card for a long time and was a big part of Masters 25. And then, of course, Recruiter of the Guard coming in Conspiracy Take the Crown had a huge impact on everything. Recruiter of the Guard. Again, this one's a weird one for me to say as a soldier, but I guess you do need like recruiters for the army, so I'll let this one slide. When Recruiter of the Guard enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a creature card with toughness 2 or less, reveal it and put it in your hand, and then shuffle your library. So very similar to Imperial Recruiter, being a 3-mana 1/1 that allows you to go get something based on the Imperial Recruiter goes and gets it based on power. This gets it based on toughness. You're able to actually go get things like Flicker Wisp as well out of the Death and Taxes deck. Just a really powerful, impactful card on the game. Being able to search out your silver bullets, go get your Containment Priest, go get your Fairy Macabre after sideboard, go get a whatever it is you want to go get. Your Walking Ballista I've seen in some lists. And yeah, just a extremely potent, powerful card.
You can vial it in. I'm sorry.
Oh no, yeah. And you're not wrong. You totally can vial it in.
You can vial it in. You can Flicker Wisp it. Again, there are so many ways to abuse this card. It's currently going for at least $20+. I mean, this was a card that Death and Taxes needed like a hole in the head. And now that they have a way to tutor for their things, it's like, oh yay, you can get your Thalias, you can get whatever you want, and just so good, so good.
Yeah, you can get it's around sort of $19 to $20 something depending on where you're looking.
Forge Mystic.
Oh yeah, and this was my number 9 because this card is real, and it's just this is one of those examples of where Wizards can just make the most insane cards, but they're only going in like Legacy and Vintage or whatever, so who cares? Because this isn't a card you'd want to exist in Modern. This isn't a card you want to exist in Standard. That'd be ridiculous. So like they're like, yeah, we can do stuff like this. We can do Arena Rector was in Battle Bond because who cares? These old formats are busted. Whatever, you guys can get stupid, silly tutors. And instead of it wrecking havoc, it instead makes these sets more valuable. Adds really interesting effects and really powerful effects that you just can't put in those high-powered formats. So that's really cool. Number 3 for you, Aaron.
I have a lot of respect for modern affinity decks. I enjoy facing them no matter what deck I'm playing, whether it be Ad Nauseam or Dredge, but I respect their ability. Game recognizes game, and I know what it's like to play a deck that people oftentimes have hate cards for. But Affinity has a remarkable ability to punch through whatever you have going. You can play a Stony Silence on turn 2, but there's a very good chance that Affinity can just sneeze out their hand and beat you to death with a bunch of little creatures. If you happen to play a lot of blockers on the ground, one of the ways that they can get around that is with my number 3. If they happen to gain a lot of life, you have Inkmoth Nexuses. And so the deck is just so versatile and really can't be kept down historically. When you look at just how long Affinity has been a thing, how many hate cards are printed, and Affinity still demands respect. And one of the reasons why it demands respect is because of my number 3, which is Etched Champion. So Etched Champion is from Scars of Mirrodin. It's this creature type soldier, 3 colorless, artifact creature, 2/2 with Metalcraft. Etched Champion has protection from all colors as long as you control 3 or more artifacts. Very easy to do when you're playing Modern Affinity with your Ornithopters, your Darksteel Citadels, and things of that nature. And then once that thing is turned on, you have an unlimited blocker. You have a way to punch through. You put a cranial plating on this, and you have a field day. It's just so easy to get this thing going. It can be used defensively or offensively. It can get incredibly big if you're playing with things like Steel Overseer, Master of Therium, and this card can just make or break games. There are so many games that people have had answers for. You know, you're looking at your Ancient Grudges, and you're like, well, that's cute. You can't touch it. Your Lightning Bolts can't touch it. There's so many things that just can't deal with it. Edict Effects probably won't work because Affinity just has so many creatures. And so there are very few ways to deal with it once it's live. And I just love everything about it.
There's just a point where you're like, Wizards, you know that cranial plating exists, right? You know, you know that, right? Like Scars of Mirrodin was like from the Scars of Mirrodin, and the scars that you left were like, these artifacts are overpowered. Let's give them one of the best 3-drops I've ever seen. It's absolutely ridiculous.
This and Master of Ethereum tend to swap spot as the 3-drop in the Affinity deck. And to be a 3-drop in a deck like Affinity, you've got to do something really special. And this does something really special. This card has its Metalcraft turned on more often than not in those Affinity decks. Very rarely are you able to target it with any sort of colored spell, be it Pass Exile, be it Lightning Bolt. There's very little that shuts this thing off. Things like, I guess, Ensnaring Bridge is about it, and then other Etched Champions is about all there is.
I don't know why it feels like it would be clunkier or maybe less elegant or whatever, but first of all, I think Metalcraft is too good. I think they made Metalcraft. Yes. Metalcraft was just basically OP, and it was OP because it turned on so quickly. If Metalcraft were 5, I think it would be fine. Not amazing. You wouldn't have like Mox Opals everywhere if it were 5.
Or
but
you could make it, you could put a number on it. Sort of like Metalcraft 4, Metalcraft 6, Metalcraft 10, Metalcraft 2.
Yeah. I mean, and that would be, I think, really interesting, a way to fix that, where you could have Mox Opal be Metalcraft 4, but you could have this be Metalcraft 3, and it wouldn't be that bad. But when everything is that same level, and it's so easy to get, like 3 with artifact lands is just a joke.
Not even good cards. Like you don't have to. You can play Ornithopters. You can play Signal Pests. You can play Lotus Petals. I mean, it's not like it takes a lot of work to get going. It's frighteningly easy.
Yeah, I think it would have behooved Wizards, and I think if they ever come back to Metalcraft, they'll be like, look, we want to be able to turn those knobs just the way we want to, instead of just being flat across the board. And here's kind of what happens when it's like, damn, that's really all you need to do to get that thing to work. Okay. Sure. Well, these days there is a very popular soldier, and I love playing with it. I think it's been super cool. Wizards has printed it a whole bunch of times. We've been here ever since Magic 2011 when it first showed up. There's all sorts of mondos and combos with this card, and it's been super sweet. It got a huge spotlight at the Pro Tour via LSV because they took the deck in a very certain way. And the way they took a deck was sort of in the life gain model. And if you're in the life gain mode, you want a Johnny's Pridemate to be the soldier for you, a Johnny's soldier in and of himself. A Johnny's Pridemate is a white and a generic mana for a 2/2 uncommon cat soldier. Whenever you gain life, you may put a +1/+1 counter on a Johnny's Pridemate, and that's all you need to do. But there is Fountain of Renewal. That card exists, and just on turn 1, you start gaining life, and every turn your Pridemate gets bigger. You have lots of creatures with lifelink these days, lots of tokens with lifelink these days, and a lot of sort of incidental kind of, oh, I gain life, oh, that's gonna up my Johnny's Pridemate over and over again. People have to kill that card as soon as they see it because, oh my god, it's going to grow too big, and I'm going to die.
Yeah,
and they frame it so much. It's just...
The best way to turn on a Johnny's Pridemate is that turn 1 Healer's Hawk that we love so much.
Yeah.
Some excellent stuff with Legion's Landing as well, the back half of a Hunted Witness. There's so many ways to turn it on in Standard. Of course, it's also a bit infamous now in being the first card to functionally change as a result of Magic Arena. Whereas it was originally printed as a may, it is now no longer a choice. A Johnny's Pridemate does have to get bigger.
And miss me with that citywide bust strats you guys were running. It's like, well, if I'm on a citywide bust, I can't stop it from doing it. Get out of here. Get off.
Evan Irwin says, miss me. Man, love it. Yeah, a Johnny's Pridemate is a heck of a card. Been reprinted a couple of times. It's been relevant a couple of times. And yeah, it's a really good card.
Miss me with your extra, okay? Do that. Thanks. Let's move on here to number 2. Ruben, what's your number 2?
My number 2 is higher on someone else's list.
Ooh, all right then. Fair enough. Aaron, what's your number 2?
So as I mentioned on our 1 converted mana cost creature episode, having a good 1-drop can make or break a tribal strategy. And my number 2 is exactly the kind of 1-drop that you want if you are playing any sort of creature strategy with similar creature types. This is one of the reasons why people have expressed concern lately over humans, because it feels like humans just have so many toys. I remember when the new deputy came out in Ravnica Allegiance, people were like, it's a Vidalkin, thank God, because humans didn't need another toy that you can violin or that you can do whatever with. This card was a standard all-star. It is now a modern all-star. Good in the early game, good in the late game. So many ways to abuse it. My number 2 is Champion of the Parish. So Champion of the Parish is from Innistrad. It's a human soldier, 1 white for a 1/1. Whenever another human enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Champion of the Parish. You need to deal with that thing right now. Dark blasted, bolted, whatever you need to do, because if you leave it alone for a while, it's going to get out of hand very fast. Humans are very good at making other humans, whether they be through tokens. They're also very good at pumping up other humans. You have cards like Thalia's Lieutenant, which are gross. The ability to violin humans, Phantasmal Image humans. I mean, this card gets out of hand so quickly, and is a very important piece of modern humans. And I don't think the deck would be as good if you didn't have a card like this that just gets so good over time with very little effort.
Yeah, this is one of the stars from the original Innistrad release, and one of the ways that, like, oh, humans are cool, right? Humans do super cool things, and what, you'll give us a land that lets you pick a creature type so they're uncounterable? Nothing can go wrong. Right. That would be crazy.
Yeah. Not only does it fix your mana, but yeah.
Yeah, it kind of busts it. This is a card that just kind of continues to steamroll and get larger and larger and larger. And like 2 turns later, you're like, whoa, how big is that creature again? Because everything just keeps triggering it on and on again. And every single creature they print from now into eternity, it's like, well, if it's a human, how good is it? And are we going to be abusing it in this crazy modern humans deck?
Yeah. Okay. I wonder if we'll ever do a top 10 humans on this show, just because there are so many soldiers. There's like 600, but there's like 2,200 humans.
There's a lot
so
of
humans. It's by far and away the most creature type. This was my number 10, by the way.
Nice.
Has had success in most formats, was a powerhouse all the way through standard, mono white, blue white, Naya Blitz, various kinds of aggro decks all the way through its lifespan. Has enjoyed a resurgence in modern with the humans deck. Just a fabulous card.
There are 2,222 human.
Wow, exactly? That's great.
That's great. But that's a lot, and it's so broad. It's almost just essentially too broad. It's
almost too broad.
You can make up any reason for any of those humans being on your list because they're humans.
It got to a point where it was almost beyond the pale that we would ever get a human lord of any kind. And when they printed Mayor of Avabruck, I think that was the first human lord that we ever had. We've had 15 years of merfolk lords and warrior lords and soldier lords, and never were we going to cross the Maginot line of making humans get stuff.
Well, I will take that segue into my number 2, because if you're going to talk about a lord, if you're going to talk about a lord being the creature type, and the creature pumps the other creatures, and creatures gives them benefits like you're supposed to, Field Marshal originally showed up in Cold Snap of all places.
Perfect.
And then back again in 10th edition. And
Cold
Snap, y'all. Look, because Field Marshal is a soldier lord. That's what he does. It's 2 white and generic mana for a 2/2 rare human soldier, and other soldiers get +1/+1 and have first strike. And that's good, clean living right there. That is what makes soldiers soldiery? Well, they have to be soldiers, and this guy makes them bigger, and that's the benefit that you get. So if you're going to build your soldier deck, make sure you don't forget your field marshals, and that's why I felt it was near the top of my list of just like, it's the soldierest soldier, because it's a soldier that pumps other soldiers, and you can play multiples of them, and they pump each other, which is really, really awesome. It's not legendary or anything, so you can really kind of go buck wild with your crazy soldiers deck thanks to your soldier lord.
Back at Grand Prix Toronto earlier this February, Russ Jeffrey was one of the 9-0 finishers on Saturday with a full 4 copies of Field Marshal. Unfortunately, the wheels fell off, but it is nice to see just a good old-fashioned soldiers deck stomping its way through the metagame. Field Marshal is the lord that you want. If soldiers is ever going to be a thing in any format as a tribal strategy, that's the one you want.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And also did that weird 10th edition thing where the version that's foiled does not have reminder text. So,
right.
Which is kind of cool.
Which I like. I liked those. Like the 10th edition time stops that just say end of the turn are delightful.
So beautiful. All right, let's move here to our number 1. Numero uno. Aaron, what is your number 1?
So I play Magic to feel something, damn it. And I only feel something when I'm doing broken things. And you might think, when you look at the soldiers that are out there, soldiers seem like they're incredibly fair. Yeah, you can give a creature indestructible. Yeah, you can make your tribal guy a little bit bigger. You can have a lord. You can put your zombies on horses. That's really cute. But like, what if you pushed it? What if you had a soldier that allowed you to do an infinite combo? Do I have your attention? This is my number 1 is a very important piece of the Bomberman strategy that you might hear in Legacy and or Vintage. And it's just, I don't have the courage to play this because it's a little too deep even for me.
Amazing.
I won't go in the 8-foot pool. I'll stay in like the 4 or 5 foot. But if I do decide to venture out there one of these days, and I will make sure to do it with my number 1, which is Auriok Salvagers. So Auriok Salvagers is a creature type soldier, 3 colorless and a white human soldier, a 2/4. You can pay 1 and a colorless, 1 white and a colorless to return target artifact card with converted mana cost 1 or less from your graveyard to your hand. So ideally, you want this in Lion's Eye Diamond. You make infinite mana, and then you might cast a Trinket Mage, you might go get a Walking Ballista, you might get a Pyrite Spellbomb, and you basically take all that mana that you've looped and blow their face off. This is definitely a risky deck. Like you can tell a lot about somebody when they say that they're bold enough to play this. If you ever get together with other Legacy players or their Vintage players, you usually ask what you're playing, and some people might say, "Oh, I play Oath," or "I play Eldrazi," but then you get that one guy sitting in the corner who's like, "I play Bomberman."
Bomberman. Yeah.
Like we got a badass over here, because not everybody is brave enough to play this deck. But if you are, it can be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, and also, of course, it works the best with Black Lotus. If you're like sort of you don't have to discard your hand over and over again, for example.
Right.
But again, the idea of just like I make infinite mana and then I'll got this Pyrite Spellbomb and you're dead. Like, sure.
You can get Walking Ballistas. You can make other spellbombs and just balance all their stuff. You can even get a Monastery Mentor and like just cast a bunch of free things. There's so many things you can do, and I love it.
It's busted weird.
I'm pretty embarrassed to not have this one on my list, honestly. I did not. This is another one of like, wait a second, that's a soldier? Because it's a Salvagers.
Like, you ain't about that life, Ruben. You like it pretty fair.
Oh, no, excuse me. I've played this card in Legacy tournaments in the past.
Oh, okay.
I played this in Jeskai Painter Bomberman for a little while, where I had Trinket Mages and Imperial Recruiters to go get my Painter Servants, my Grindstones, and I had the Pyrite Spellbomb, Lion's Eye Diamond, Auriok Salvagers combo. Okay. This is also an Oath target. You got to be doing something special if you're an Oath of Druids card, especially one that's a 2/4 for 4.
Oath, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, just a really good inclusion. I'm honestly, sometimes I think that you're a little weird with your number 1s. This one, I think you got it. I think that you might be right.
Very nice. Well, Ruben, what is your number 1?
My number 1 is I was shocked. All right. I have my own rules. I have my own rule set of what it takes to be number 1. I need it to be an iconic card. I need it to have won a Pro Tour. I need it to be in the Vintage Cube. I need it to be expensive monetarily. I need it to have had a lot of finishes, not just be a flash in the pan, kind of deal. The only card that that ticks off all of the boxes. I did not have any other card that ticked off every box. This card won a Pro Tour as a 4 of in the hands of one Mr. Patrick Chapin in his junk deck at Pro Tour Journey into Nyx. It is currently the 4th most expensive non-Portal 3 Kingdoms soldier. It is in the Vintage Cube. Not a lot of cards of our soldiers are in the Vintage Cube, and not a lot of soldiers are in the Vintage Cube. But this one is, and it's an iconic character, and it's an iconic card that we've discussed in the past as being a little bit disappointing, actually, from a disappointing set, something that we had hoped better for. But by my own metrics, Brimaz, King of Ereskos, is the best soldier of all time. Brimaz, King of Ereskos, is a colorless white legendary creature cat soldier. It's a 3/4 with vigilance. Whenever Brimaz attacks, create a 1/1 white cat creature soldier token with vigilance that's attacking. And whenever Brimaz blocks, create a 1/1 cat soldier creature token with vigilance that's blocking that creature. Just an insanely powerful card. Obviously, the stats are out of this world. A 3/4 for 3 with vigilance that has 2 positive abilities that can make other stuff. Obviously, it's won a Pro Tour in the hands of one of the masters, Patrick Chapin, and I have no choice but to put it at number 1 on my list.
That is a bold choice. I was expecting something like Thalia, but like,
I mean, Brimaz is my number 6. Like, this is a real card. Here's the problem, right? The problem was Brimaz was previewed and everyone lost their minds. This card looks like value on value. Oh my God, on value. How does this card not just completely crush? And it didn't show up anywhere. And it literally didn't really show up much. And even when Chapin was running it, like, it kind of came and went even. Like, I was like, why is no one playing this card? It is too good not to be playing, and no one was playing the freaking card.
It was just too fair. I think this was a format that had mono black devotion and we had mono blue devotion. And like, if you want to, you can play a room full of pack rats or you can play a kitty boy. And like, there just was no, everyone else was doing broken things. You know, I just didn't think it just didn't line up well with what the rest of the format was doing. And it's a shame because when you do look at it, you think there is something here. Like, even the few times that I did face it, I did feel this urge to like deal with it. I knew it was something I couldn't ignore, but just when you look at what everyone else is doing, it's like, why would you want to do that when you these other things?
And Born of the Gods, we've made fun of enough on this show to fill our own episode of just but you know, the numbers rarely lie, and it's still popular. It still sees it must still see some amount of play. People still want it because it's got that high price tag. Yeah.
Sometimes you see it in like modern taxes, you know, as like a 1 or 2 of. I don't even think I see it in Commander at all, which you would think, you know, that's where a lot of cards go to, you know, kind of the retirement home for cards. You know, they go to Commander, and like I don't even.
I was looking at my own list and going, is Brimaz really going to be my number 1? Oh my God, what is happening in my brain?
It's just this is one of those cards that like it does not make sense as to why it wasn't a superstar. It does not make sense as to why we still don't talk about it as much. You know, it won a Pro Tour and yet like just faded off into obscurity almost immediately. Whereas Fleece Mainline we can talk about for years.
I'm going to give it this modicum of respect.
Okay,
fair enough. Well, look, through the magic of deduction, I know exactly what Ruben's number 2 happens to be. And in fact, I know how well, because Aaron just mentioned it.
Yeah.
When it comes to soldiers, and I'm like, soldiers. Okay, who's the soldier I think of? Who is the number 1? Who's the one that as soon as she showed up, as soon as she got reprinted in Masters 25, people were excited to see her. She is great. She has one of the coolest, most insane World Magic Cup qualifier promos. It's one of my favorite promos of all time from Steve Argyle painted that one. But you can't deny the power, the grace, you know, the finishes of Thalia, Guardian of Thraben.
I don't know her.
Thalia, Guardian of Thraben is a white and a generic mana for a 2/1 rare legendary human soldier with first strike, and non-creature spells cost 1 generic more to cast. Yeah, she's so good.
Her. I appreciate the power level. It's very much there, but I have never played a deck that's happy to see her. Living End doesn't want to see her. I remember learning that lesson for the hardest time. I'm going to cascade into this thing. Oh, you need to pay one more. Like, why?
Yeah.
I remember having to learning about Sunburst and the interaction between Sunburst and Thalia. Just so many obnoxious rules interactions. And then they go ahead and reprint her, and she's good too. Like, you can play both of them in the same deck, and she's just nothing good ever comes from her.
I mean, the promo from the World Magic Cup is amazing. It's so rare to see just like someone's face as a magic card.
The close up like that.
Why does she have first strike? Why?
I mean,
because she is a lancer. She uses an epee, so she has much more dexterity.
She can get the epee out of here.
Wow.
The long sword.
Wow. The epee out of here. Got it.
She's a stabby girl as opposed to a slashing girl.
Well, I've recently noticed there's a card called Burn Bright from Ravnica Allegiance, which also features just a face. And that, again, to me is so rare. It makes me go, oh, wow, that's cool. And that's different. That's unique. Because they just don't draw magic cards like that. Yeah. They always have those different scenes and, dressings.
The one that reminded me when I first saw this was Jor Kadeen, which is a Boros colored commander that had the close up on the face. And when I saw the promo Thalia, that's what I thought of as well. Very rare to have that face close up kind of stuff. Very cool, interesting art style. And of course, the original art is super iconic.
So good.
When you think soldier, she is a soldier. She is like, her entire existence is guarding Thraben during a battle. Like, that is iconic story moment. He was a titular character, or maybe not a titular character, but a formative character, a very important figure in the Hellvault story arc of the original Ravnica. Kept around. Future printing of her, the Heretic Cathar, became tournament playable. Her lieutenants became tournament playable. Just all the way around an all-star.
Right, and Thalia is just one of those cards that you can essentially, it's sort of a magic, it's sort of a very sort of a Magic the Gathering term at this point. You know what a recruiter does. You know what Thalia is going to mean. Important Thalia is going to mean human soldiers and knights. Thalia is going to lead the charge. Thalia is going to hate on a certain type of deck or a certain type of strategy. And
a cornerstone of Death and Taxes, of Maverick, of
even survival decks, survival of the fittest decks run her because you can tutor for her, and it's like
the white Eldrazi decks utilize her as well, just all over the place.
Absolutely terrific. Well, those are all of our top 10 soldiers. You will see them on screen right now for your review. Take a look at my list, Aaron's list, Ruben's top 10, and we want to hear from you about what we did not talk about, what card we didn't talk about, and we'll select our favorite for a $50 gift certificate to CoolStuffInc.com. But before we go, I want to thank my co-host. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ruben.
Thank you.
Move on here to our final slide. I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, our co-sponsors, CardHoarder.com and CardamondJakes.com, my co-hosts, Aaron Campbell and Ruben Bressler. You guys for watching and listening, and hope you support us at Patreon.com/MagicMikes. Follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe to everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online at Twitch.tv at MagicMikes, on Twitter at MagicMikesCast, our Magic Mike subreddit, and like the Magic Mikes page on Facebook. Talk to us privately at MagicMikesPodcast@gmail.com. Follow the audio-only podcast at MagicMikesPodcast.libsyn.com, or find us on iTunes, or find us on Spotify, or join us here next week. Same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mikes. Good night, everybody.